Good evening once again, and welcome to the session tonight. It's good to be here. And for tonight, I would like to suggest that we get a pen and paper and take copious notes. It will be helpful. And then also try to figure out where you fit into the picture. And we are going through, as we indicated yesterday. Yesterday, we spoke in a nutshell of what is a proposal, and we spoke of a tool. And then we also looked at why proposals fail. And then we started looking at hints or tips for successful grant proposals. Now, this evening, before I go into that, I also want to encourage us that in order for any organization or NGO to have successful grants, you need to have a strategy. Yesterday, I spoke of a fundraising strategy that some organizations have, depending on the size, but I also spoke of fund development or fund development strategy. In most of the organizations nowadays, as we grow, we make we make provision for a resource mobilization strategy, and we combine fund development and fundraising into that strategy. The purpose of such a strategy is you will be able to then do your fundraising market analysis, like we spoke of yesterday. Look at what is happening in the market, look at what the donors are focusing on, but also look at what is trending. Also look at what is on your national agenda. Are those issues that you want to address, are they of national need? What is in the interest and the need of the people or the population that you need to serve? And then you now come up with your strategy. And within that strategy, you can also do your SWOT analysis and look at the strengths and weaknesses of what your organization has to offer. And in that, you now look at the different donors. Like, for example, for the organizations that I currently work with, I have a resource mobilization strategy, and that is separate from my strategic plan. So the strategy in itself is for fund development and for fundraising. And with what comes out of that, we mobilize resources. In other words, every single individual department within the organization benefit from the resource mobilization strategy. And you can also look at SWOT analysis, PESTEL analysis. You can also look at the top donors. Like yesterday, I said you need to look at who funded you before and what your relationships are. You can look at the funding in the different sectors. I spoke of pockets of money that every government should have for such funding. But then also, you can now look at the different type of donors and what you ask from them. And when you have this strategy in place, you can be able, or you will be able to look at every department in your organization and see what you need, how much you need for every department. That will also help you to look at what type of funding you write proposals for. Some can be just a simple concept note, some can be just a simple fundraising proposal, some can be just an ask or a request for funding, and some can be for bigger donors. Now, my focus when I speak of grant proposals, I'm also looking at bigger donors. Somebody asked an important question yesterday about funding from private sector or private partnerships. These can also be big funding proposals depending on the amount that they are willing to give. Like in Namibia, for example, we have what we call the CSI. I spoke yesterday about corporate social investment, and they can fund from 250,000 to 500,000. So it depends on what they are willing to give. So in such a strategy also, you have to look at brand visibility, or we call it strategic visibility. We have to look every year or every month, I will give a certain amount to a certain organization. Then you can also look in such a strategy, you can also look at your NGO partners, consortium partners, because there you can request bigger funding. Then you can also look at your major giving, that is from corporates. There are corporates that inject funding, a certain amount of funding into organizations every year. You can also look at events when it comes to fundraising. You can look at events, for example, if you need $1 million and you need it very fast, to do a breakfast meeting with high network or net worth individuals. That is where you can get bigger amounts. And then you can also look at a major donor giving. You can also look at donor recognition as well, because donor recognition can also get committed givers. So that is just an introduction for you so that you can see what are the use of your proposals. Why do you write proposals? But in principle, as I've indicated, here in my proposal writing process, I refer to development grants that fund development organizations. And I will give examples as we go through, and you can relate to that. But if I don't mention any, because I won't be able to give examples of everything, then you should feel free to ask in the end. So welcome once again on board, and I think you now had enough time to get a pen and paper. If you are wise enough, you will keep your proposal at hand and see, use it as a checklist and see if you have everything in place. And you can also ask questions in the end. Now, yesterday we were looking at writing a grant proposal. And yesterday we also looked at what are the issues that make us to lose funding. And today we will continue. We'll continue from that. Let me just continue where we went. The first one we had yesterday, we said you need to research thoroughly. You need to do a thorough research of your organization that you are asking funding from. You must do a thorough research. I'm sorry, this thing is acting up here. Please, if the network is bothering you from this side, please let me know, because I know the network is not fine. It's raining here in Namibia. So yeah, yesterday we said research thoroughly. I'm not going through that. We spoke of what you need to look at in research, and we will look at that again as we move on. Secondly, we also spoke of understanding the application requirements, and that is also important for us as we go through this process. Today is number 3. We continue with number 3. Number 3 is you need to plan your project. Now, in the picture that I'm having here, you will see the issues or the brainstorming around the project planning. The project planning is the funding that you are, the proposal that you are writing, the funding that you need, and the execution that will take place with that. So what is the kind of thinking that needs to go into this proposal? You're going to look at your project strategy. Going to look at your strategy. You will look at the management of the project. You will look at the marketing of the project. You will look at the realization. The realization speaks of implementation or to materialize it. You are going to look at monitoring and evaluation. You will look at the finance. You will look at the development, and then you will look at the investment. Yesterday, there was an important question. Somebody was asking, who are the individuals on the team? If you look at what you have brainstormed here, the different departments that I have indicated here, or the components, you will also see individuals working within those departments or spearheading those departments that are key to the proposal you are writing. Those are the individuals that will be part of the team that are writing. And remember, I also said external collaborators. These will be your individuals that are part of your consortium. So yesterday I said the project manager. If the project manager is not the head of the organization, but if you have a separate project manager, your CEO or your director will be part of it. Then your project manager will be part of it. If there's a project officer that will execute the project, they will also play a role. Your finance team will play a role. Individuals in governance will play a role because they come in to play when you are signing off the agreement. And then your individuals in monitoring and evaluation play a role. And then the individuals that are in contact with the development partners. In most of the organizations that I work with, we had one individual that spearheads the writing process as well. And those are also the individuals that are in connecting to the development partners. I also said there need to be regular meetings in the process, and that is all part of the planning. So today we take a further look at that. You must clearly outline your project plan. When you apply for a grant, it's important to clearly outline your project plan. I'm going to give you quite some information tonight, but what I want you to do for you to understand is just imagine I am the donor, I'm sitting with the funding, and I will give it to you from that angle, because I worked with organizations before where we provided the funding to the individual organizations. Organizations can have two functions when it comes to funding. They can be an organization that are a recipient of funds and then they execute. So then we say the role is simply capacity building. They are building the capacity of the CBOs or the organizations that they are funding. But then you get the direct funding process from the donor to the CBO, or from the donor to whoever receives the funds. So in big funding like the Global Fund on HIV, AIDS, and TB and malaria, you usually find that in every country, they have a principal recipient, which is Ministry of Health, because these are health issues. And then they have a sub-recipient. Like in our country, we have the principal recipient, Ministry of Health and Social Services, and only one sub-recipient. And that sub-recipient can be the head of NGOs, head of AIDS service organizations or malaria service organizations. And then we have what we call sub-recipients. And these ones are the ones that are executing on the ground. And then what happens now is the role of the principal or the prime recipient, they receive the overall fund. The sub-recipient receives funds from the prime recipient, and then the sub-recipient is responsible for execution of funding to the sub-recipient. And we usually recommend that they work in consortiums, in clusters. In other words, if I am an HIV service organization or let's say child protection organization, like I made an example yesterday, and our focus is education, then all the organizations or the CBOs that are dealing with education will be in the same cluster. They must write one proposal, and that one proposal is submitted. And when funding comes, we look at priority areas and distribute the funds to them. Now, when you apply for a grant, it's important to clearly outline your project plan. That is your goals, your objectives, the methods, and expected outcomes. I've broken this down for you to have a better understanding, because point number 3 is one of the areas where people make the most mistakes in the proposal development process or in the grant writing process. Now, you clearly outline your project plan. And then what are we saying? Define your goals and your objectives. Defining the overall goals of the project and the specific projects that you hope to achieve. Now, when we say define them, your goals must be smart. Your objectives must be very, very smart. It must be clear. If you say you want to target 1,000 individuals with ARV services within 2024, that is a very generic goal. It's very general. So you will want to say provide ARV services for 1,000 individuals in whatever county from January to December 2024. Okay? If you want to break it down further, you will want to say target or provide services, target 1,000 individuals through ARV services from January to December 2024 in Juan town, whatever your town is called there. And then you mentioned the town, you mentioned the service, you mentioned the individual. You can break it further down into county. If the county has a further location, you can break it further down. If you want to make to specify it further, you target 1,000 males and females. You now break it down. If you want to further break it down, you put down the age group, but your goals must be very specific. It must be very measurable. It must be very attainable. It must be realistic, and it must be time bound. It must be time bound. And remember, we're dealing with projects. Projects are time bound. And then also your objectives must be very, very specific, and it must be the objectives that you hope to achieve. Some people copy from other proposals, and then they end up writing that proposal and things that that proposal hope to achieve and try to modify it to their proposal, and they make a mistake. When you come back to that proposal, you cannot understand what you really want. Now, remember, I said something yesterday. Somebody asked about secret of proposal writing. There are many secrets, and one of the secrets are write with the end recipient in mind. In other words, I am your donor sitting here. You write with a mindset of how I would understand it. So it must be very simple. You write very, very simple, clear and concise and simple. That is how your objective should be, because if it's a thick proposal that needs to be received, we first run to the objectives. We first run to the goals. That will tell us this person knows what he or she wants. This person makes sense. We call it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, you are being parked for later. Okay, so this will also help you to stay focused and ensure that your project plan is aligned with the funding organization's priorities. So that is what we mean when we say define your goals and objectives. Secondly, after defining or when defining, you describe the methods you will use to achieve your objectives. This may include very specific methods, programs, or interventions that you will implement. Now remember, each one of us know what we want to do, know how we achieve our goals. If you cannot understand it, you tell yourself, I am living in Juan and I want to get to Monrovia. How am I getting there? The description of how you get there, the description, the broken down description, that is what we mean when we say describe your methods. Your specific activities could be very common in projects, is trainings, it's workshops, it's awareness raising meetings, campaigns. But even if you say campaign can be very generic. You must break it down. So we want specifics, simple, very simple specifics of the activities or of the programs, whatever type of programs. Is it a literacy program? Is it a mental health program? And so on. Or the interventions that you will implement. The interventions could be a vaccination intervention, or maybe it is just a public rally that you are going to have, but we want to know the methods, and you need to describe it to its finest detail. I always tell individuals, let me rather come back to you as the donor and tell you this is enough detail. We don't need more than this. Then you not giving enough information for the end line person to understand. So it's very important when you describe, the key there or the secret there is the detail. However, the detail must be to the understanding of the donor. Thirdly, you identify your target audience. Many times people write and you can't figure out who exactly, because in the first they say individuals, and then they speak of the men of this county will benefit like this, and later you hear the youth and you just don't know whether they mean the male youth folk or whom they are speaking of. So you need to be able to identify your target audience. Identify your target audience. You have to consider who your project will serve. Now, this can be very, very tricky, because the other day we had a business boot camp, and when it came to the target audience or the target the market, we were looking at it like this. Perhaps you want to sell biscuits to children, or you want to provide it to children. The child will not be your target. It is the parent that will be the target, because you have to go through them. That is why you must know who your target project is. The target is different from the beneficiary. So within your target, I would want to see, if you target me, who is the beneficiary? In some cases, I can be the target and the beneficiary, but it depends on the nature of the project. Then you describe your target audience. These children between 6 and 17 that are schooling at the following 10 schools. You give the names and you give the grades, and you just give a description of the children, and you give the number of children, and you give whether it's male or female. And so that is how you do a detailed description. And it may include specific demographics. I think I've mentioned that, geographic locations and so on. So very important that you describe. Then fourthly, outline expected outcomes. Clearly outline the expected outcomes of your project. Indicate short-term and long-term impacts. And this may include changes, either whether it's a behavior change approach that you are having, whether it's increased awareness, or whether it's improved health outcomes, whatever it is. Maybe if it's a water project, improved water supply, whatever, hygiene improved, but you must be able to outline expected outcomes, because as the donor, I want to sit there and look at it, and I want to say, I don't know what this individual want to achieve with this. Remember, giving me an activity, asking money for activity is not asking money for outcome. There must be a reason why you want money for that specific activity. So your ability to demonstrate useful results indicate an understanding of effective utilization of funding. The issue here in outlining expected outcomes is, what will happen to my funds? What is the benefit of the funding that I am providing you? So tailor your proposal. Point number 4, you tailor your proposal. This is important. It's important to demonstrate a strong connection between your project and the funding organization's mission and goals. So yesterday we spoke of your mission and goals, but here I'm asking you to show the correlation between your project and the mission and goals of the funding organization. What am I saying? If I am an organization, remember you've done your research in the beginning and you saw that I am UNICEF and I provide education for socially disadvantaged children. So are the goals of your project in alignment to the funder's mission and goals? Or maybe sometimes it could be a UNICEF that does not generally, in a generic proposal, now target children, but they target hygiene in schools because there are children in schools. So does the mission and goals of my organization align with that? Secondly, research your funder. You research the funder as well, the mission and goals, and it will help you to understand their priorities. What am I saying? Sometimes you are asking for money for sports equipment or for a sports program, a sports development program. But it's important that you need to understand my mission and goals. When you write your proposal, you must also be sensitive. We are sensitive about racist issues, or we are sensitive about individuals that discriminate against children with learning disabilities. So you need to be able to be sensitive to what we are sensitive about, so that we never come back to you and say, you are asking money for sports development program. What do you do with children with disabilities that want to participate in the sports? And it's not that we will not fund you. We need you to know and to understand what you are doing, because sometimes the donor can come and say, I will fund you provided that you add this component or you add this objective and you execute. So you need to understand that before you even decide whether you are ready to write a proposal to this organization. And again, identify key areas of alignment. Once you understand the funder's mission and goals, identify key areas where your projects align, and you highlight that, you bring it out, because that is also what will be helpful. And then highlight shared values. When describing your project, highlight shared values between your organization and the fund and the funder. This may include a commitment to social justice, to equity, or to community engagement. Maybe your organization already has a program where you engage the community leaders or youth in the community in debates around healthcare issues, health-friendly services, and this organization might just be sensitive about the same issues. So it's very, very important that you know what the individual's interest is and know whether you are eligible to get funding from them. Sometimes you can be blessed or in a position whereby whatever you bring before them, they decide, no, we don't really fund this, but it's a good cause. We can also take it up. So important, that is what we mean when we say tailor your proposal. By highlighting how your project aligns with the funder's mission, you can demonstrate that you are a strong fit for their funding. Because there's always a question, what will qualify me to fund you and not the organization in the next county? So secondly, or next, you now showcase your expected impacts and outcomes. You need to showcase your outcomes. Now, there are processes. Remember, for you to get outcome, there has been inputs, and that must come out. And then with inputs being implemented or responded to, there will be outputs. And out of the outputs, we now see outcomes. And over a long period of time, you will see the impact of these outcomes. So you need to know the process, and you need to know how to evaluate in order for you to showcase what is expected. Number one, you start with a clear objective. Clearly define the objective of your project, what you hope to achieve with this particular fund. And this will help you to articulate the potential impact and the expected outcomes of your project. The impact could be, there can be an increased response to help from young people to the health-friendly services. Maybe your project has indicated that you need to train more healthcare workers or community health workers in youth health, and to provide health-friendly services at community health clinics. So maybe you want to see an increase uptake of services, for example. So you should be able, you must clearly define your objective and what you hope to achieve. So when I come in and look at where you are implementing your project before I give you funding, I must look at the environment where your program is taking place and see, is it really, really possible that this need funding, or with funding we will see that change? So this will help you to articulate the potential impact. We say potential because it's still in progress, and then also expected outcomes of your project. And then you use data and you research. So that is important because it supports or sustains your claims of your potential impact. And then also, you must always include statistics, include studies that has been conducted or other evidence that show the potential impact of your project. Now, if this is a project and no studies has ever been conducted in this particular region or county or area where you want to implement, you must indicate as such. What we do nowadays, or what we look at as entities that fund other entities, we look at, did you put in provision for research within this project? Is there a baseline study? Because if there's nothing, we need baseline information. And if you have given us information, what do you base it on if there's no baseline? So you can use existing information of other countries and other projects, but the problem is in your community. So there will be baseline. You put baseline in your proposal. And then there must also, if there's a baseline, there must also be an end line in your proposal. And that is separate from a monitoring and evaluation. Sometimes there is a need for research first and a need for a baseline after research has been conducted. The baseline will just help you to look at maybe your target population. Target population is the target number. It's not the target audience. If you can hear me, the number of individuals that you will put in this project. And if it's a long-term funding or an organization that has got repeated funding, you can then also, if you've done your research and your baseline, you decide I'm only starting with 200 individuals or children or whomever I'm targeting, and with the aim to scale up after 2 years. So there you have a donor and you build your donor relation should you get such funding. So using data and research is important. Then outline specific outcomes. Be specific about the outcomes you expect to achieve through your project. You must be specific. You must be intentional about the outcomes, because remember, you write a proposal to me. The day I come back to you, could be 3 or 6 months later. You must know everything that you have written. You must understand what were your thoughts around it, and you should be able to present it as such when the donor come and look at the project. And then you must show the relevance. Clearly explain why your project is relevant and why it is important, how it addresses a specific need or problem in the community or organization. Sometimes people write very good proposals, but they can't explain you why it's more important than the next person's proposal. And that proposal might not be a very good, strong proposal, but they can clearly identify why they need that fund. And then the fund goes to the next organization. Consider the long-term impact. What do you want to achieve in the long run? Remember, that is where we get our developmental goals, and then you get immediate goals. Developmental goals, immediate goals, and then you have your specific objectives. So in the long term or in the long run, what do you wish to see? Increased pass rates. A higher number of youth are conscious of leadership in Africa. More youth are entering into key positions because they have the knowledge and skills. More individuals are responding to trainings, leadership trainings. You know, people don't want to go into that because they have a distorted view based upon what they have seen all along in their lives. So maybe we want to see that difference or that change. That is your long-term impact. By clearly articulating the potential impact of your project and expected outcomes, you can demonstrate to your funders that your project is worthwhile and has the potential to make a meaningful difference. So that is what it's all about what you demonstrate at this stage. Now, after doing that, you now have to develop a very, very realistic budget. Now, this is very sensitive because there are so many factors that influence a project budget. And this is one area where people make so many mistakes when they are planning for a project. And that is why I do never recommend an individual drawing up a budget on his own. So when you draw up the budget, you first have to understand budgeting in its context. Everyone that is in a workplace or in an organization, wherever you sit, you are part of a budget. It costs an organization a certain amount of money to keep you in your seat. So sitting there, what is the cost attached to that? And then you break it down when you have the full view or insight. If you don't have it, you can ask it from HR, your human resource manager or your finance administrator or whoever works with compensation. Remember, I didn't say salary, I said compensation. The full package, the compensation package, the full. So that is how we need to understand that. If you have that mindset, you can now come and apply it to your project budgeting. Many times people budget for execution, but they do not budget for process. And when you skip a process, that is why, you know, the problem we have in Africa, why it's easy to practice fraud and the integrity issues and corruption, because we don't budget for process. So a realistic and detailed budget. And to ensure that you have the resources, you need to successfully complete your project on time and within budget. Successfully complete. Now, you must identify all the costs, starting by identifying all the costs. This includes direct costs, such as your materials, your labor, your equipment, as well as indirect costs such as overhead. Somebody asked yesterday, do I budget for salaries? You forever budget for salaries, forever, because there will always be an individual carrying out a certain responsibility. Very, very important. If somebody does the budget for you and you have never seen the budget, chances are that there will be money coming in and going out and flowing through on the same project that your name is attached to, in the organization that your name is attached to, and you are not aware of it. So you must identify all the costs. The list is long. I cannot mention everything here, but that's the reason why you are a team working on the project. Every individual from his or her department should get the budget. Remember, I've shown you the plan in the beginning, the brainstorming plan. So all those individuals, that is why they are there. One of the processes we used in our organization was when we start up with a project from the research stage and the planning stage, we already speak to the individuals at implementation level. Do a needs assessment, hear from them. What are the needs? Now, the activity or the need inform the budget. It's not the budget that inform the need. Hear me well. It is the activity or the need that inform the budget. It is not the budget that will inform the need. What am I saying? We are planning first for everything, and then we cost it. That is how we come up with a realistic and a detailed budget. We're planning first and then we cost it. So you identify all costs. How do you identify? Start grassroots level. Work with them. Look at the reports. Look at evaluation reports. Look at monitoring reports. Look at the needs that come from them. And then you work it up in the different levels. The departments that they report to, what comes into play with budget in that department until you have input from bottom up. Now you use that input and take it to the table where you are planning for this project. That is how we work it out. And then also, you've now identified all the costs associated with the project. And then you make sure that you have all the direct costs as well. Don't forget about the materials and the labor. And sometimes people forget, even they say transport and they budget for fuel, but they don't budget for cab money or taxi money. They don't budget for workshop, for transport within workshops. So it's a tedious process, and that is why it needs all the brains around the table. Sometimes budgeting with us, we do 5-day workshops when it comes to budgeting. And at the end of the 5 days, we have it. We have a draft for your information, not even the full budget. So indirect costs as well, like the overheads and so on. Now with the overheads and administrative, overheads are staff and salaries, okay? So overheads and admin expenses, you will decide, are we bringing in new people on board to the project? What are the donor requirements? Or are we adding to the level of effort of the existing staff members? Very important. In one of the organizations that I worked with, we decided that we first look at the eligibility criteria and what does the donor say. Some donors would come, especially the AID, USAID, American donors, they will say, we want you to employ a monitoring and evaluation officer because we have our grants agreement officer that will work with that person. Or they will say, we want you to employ a grants fund administrator to administer this grant. What do? We look at the individuals we have in the finance department already. If the staff is enough and there's somebody that is already working with grants funding, we attach that individual to this grant as well. So then this individual is now handling 3 or 4 grants, and there's a level of effort, a certain percentage that goes to that person's salary as well, in addition to what the person already has. When it comes to reporting, the requirement is that individual internally reports on each and every donor funding and donor costing, and you train your people, you train them. So that is how you can do it. Some organizations are strong, they want a very specific person. They don't want anyone who's dealing with another project because they are sensitive about their own funding. So then you can come up with somebody you put in, whether it is an officer that come and do M&E and so on. Then secondly, you break down the cost by task. Remember, I said the activity will inform the budget. Activity in the task is the activity in your project plan, every task. So this will help you to identify which tasks are more expensive than others and where you may need to make adjustments. Okay, it can be tasks like admin, financial execution. It can also be trainers. Is the task of the training more expensive than that of the financial individuals, because they will also be training for them and so on. So these are the tasks that we are talking about, whatever task, depending on the nature of the project. And then also you will use historical data, or industry benchmarks to estimate cost for each task. What I also do is, if it's equipment, obviously you go out there, you get quotations and you see what it's like in the market now, because maybe the historical data that you have is of a project that was 5 years ago, and the what do you call it, the rates was different, all the prices were lower, and so on. So this will help you to ensure that your budget is realistic and it is aligned with industry standards. So very important. Then you break down cost. Okay, that is a repetition. You consider contingencies, include contingencies in your budget. Every budget must have provision for contingency, okay? In your budget to account for unexpected expenses or changes to your project plan. Contingency is simply the unexpected, You know, sometimes it happens, let's say, for example, your things are insured, because in our contingency, we put insurance costs as well. Maybe something burns out, or the place is broken into, or there's a damage because of a disaster, and then you have money for such. And then a good rule of thumb is to set 10 to 20% of your total budget for contingencies. The donor will tell you 10 to 20% can be contingency fund. They are very open with that. They will also tell you 40% can be administrative costs. That means the people that will work with finance, and for the auditors, because you will need to have money to audit the accounts of the donors as well. So these are things that you need to consider. Review and revise your budget regularly throughout the project to ensure that you are staying on track and making adjustments as needed. You must always revise and review, always, always, always. If you don't do that, you can wake up 6 months later and discover that somebody has been feeding from this budget illegally. Somebody has been feasting on it. So it's important for us to keep track as well. The very simple way you can keep track is you look at your targets for this month. Our reach is 1,000 people in malaria vector control. So we reach 1,000 people this month. At the end of the month, you must evaluate how much you spend on that 1,000. If it's a regular activity, you already know by the third time you do that activity how much you spend on that. If there are discrepancies, it's easier to follow up. So tonight I'm ending there. I've spoken on the budget of the project. I've spoken on how to showcase impact and outcome. I've also spoken on how to tailor your proposal, and I've also spoken on how to identify your target audience and your planning process in the project. Are there any questions?